Close your eyes and imagine a medieval castle. Tall stone walls rising over green hills, kings wearing golden crowns, queens walking through grand halls in elegant gowns, long tables filled with roasted meat and shining goblets, while musicians play softly in the background. This is the image most people have when they think about the age of kings and queens. Movies and television have turned royal life into something glamorous, powerful, almost magical. Castles look warm and beautiful, royalty appears elegant and refined, and everything feels like a fairy tale. But the truth is very different. In fact, if you could travel back in time and step inside a royal castle during the Middle Ages, the first thing you would notice would not be the gold or the silk or the crowns, it would be the smell. Castles were not designed for comfort, they were built for war. Thick stone walls kept enemies out, but they also trapped cold air and moisture inside. Many rooms were dark, damp, and poorly ventilated. Smoke from fireplaces filled the halls because early chimneys did not remove it effectively, leaving the air heavy and irritating to breathe. Windows were small and often covered with wooden shutters or cloth rather than glass, making rooms feel even darker. And when hundreds of people lived inside the same structure, the result was a mixture of smells that no perfume could truly hide. Hygiene was extremely limited by modern standards. Even among the nobility, bathing regularly was uncommon. In many places, people believed that frequent bathing could make the body weaker or allow disease to enter through the skin. Instead of washing often, nobles changed their linen undergarments and used strong perfumes made from herbs, flowers, and spices to hide unpleasant odors. But perfumes could only do so much in an environment where servants, soldiers, cooks, guards, and visiting nobles all lived together in crowded spaces. Animals were also everywhere. Dogs roamed freely through castle halls, and horses were kept in nearby stables whose smells drifted through courtyards and corridors. Food scraps were often thrown outside into castle yards, attracting insects and rodents. Fleas and lice lived in bedding, clothing, carpets, and furs. Even royal beds were not immune. Noblemen and noblewomen often scratched beneath their elaborate garments, though of course they tried to hide this in public. And public life was another surprise. Today we imagine kings and queens living in private luxury, surrounded by servants, but separated from the world. In reality, medieval rulers lived almost entirely in public view. A king's daily routine was often witnessed by dozens of people. Courtiers, guards, advisors, and visiting nobles filled the royal chambers from morning until night. Even waking up could be a ceremony. In some royal courts, high-ranking nobles gathered in the king's bedroom as he dressed for the day, because helping the monarch put on clothing was considered a great honor and a chance to gain influence. Privacy, as we understand it today, barely existed. Royal fashion, which appears beautiful in paintings, was also far less comfortable than it looks. Clothing was heavy and layered, made from wool, velvet, and thick fabrics that trapped heat and sweat. Tight bodices and structured garments restricted movement. Hairstyles required oils, powders, and sometimes animal fat to hold their shapes. Wigs became popular in later centuries among European elites, but wigs brought their own problems. They could easily become infested with lice. Some nobles shaved their heads entirely and wore wigs instead, storing them on stands when not in use, though insects could still invade them during the night. Cosmetics were equally dangerous. Pale skin was considered fashionable because it showed that someone did not work under the sun like common laborers. To achieve this look, noble women often used powders containing lead or other toxic substances. Over time, these cosmetics slowly poisoned the skin and body of the people wearing them. Beauty came at a price. Yet despite all of these uncomfortable realities, royal life still held something incredibly powerful: authority. Kings controlled armies, land, and laws. Their decisions shaped entire kingdoms. A single command from the throne could start wars, raise taxes, or change the fate of thousands of people. To the outside world, this power made royal life appear extraordinary. But power created its own dangers. Because inside the walls of royal castles, the greatest threats rarely came from outside armies. They came from within the court itself. Royal courts were not just centers of luxury and ceremony. They were also arenas of constant political tension. Every noble family wanted influence over the king. Advisors competed for attention and authority. Alliances formed and dissolved quietly in corridors and private chambers. Behind the elaborate feasts and elegant ceremonies, the court functioned like a battlefield of ambition. This meant rulers had to live with constant suspicion. One of the most common fears among medieval monarchs was poisoning. Food and drink passed through many hands before reaching the royal table, which made every meal a potential danger. To reduce the risk, servants known as tasters sometimes sampled food before the king or queen ate it. Even wine could be dangerous if someone wished to eliminate a rival. Illness was another constant threat. Without modern sanitation, disease spread easily through crowded castles. Minor wounds could become deadly infections. Fevers could sweep through an entire court in a matter of days. When plague appeared in Europe, it did not spare the wealthy simply because they wore crowns. Kings and queens lived in the same environment as everyone else, breathing the same contaminated air and surrounded by the same parasites. Medical treatment offered little reassurance. Medieval physicians believed the human body was controlled by 4 fluids called humors, and illness occurred when these humors were out of balance. Treatments often involved bloodletting, strange herbal mixtures, or applying substances that today would be considered dangerous or ineffective. Sometimes the treatments themselves weakened the patient even further. Royal children were especially vulnerable. Although kings possessed great power, they could not protect their sons and daughters from disease. Many royal families lost multiple children before adulthood. Infant mortality was common across all levels of society, and royal palaces were no exception. Marriage also brought pressure rather than comfort. Royal marriages were rarely based on love. They were political arrangements designed to secure alliances between kingdoms. Princes and princesses were often promised to each other while still children, long before they had any say in the matter. A young princess might leave her homeland as a teenager to marry a king she had never met, entering a foreign court filled with strangers who judged her constantly. Her most important duty was to produce an heir. If she failed to give birth to a healthy son, her position could quickly become unstable. History contains many examples of queens losing influence, being replaced, or living under enormous pressure because the future of a dynasty depended on them. Every aspect of royal life was performance. A monarch had to appear strong even when uncertain, generous even when suspicious, calm even when surrounded by rivals. A careless decision could anger powerful nobles. A sign of weakness could encourage rebellion. Every public appearance carried political meaning, and yet centuries later, we often remember this era as a golden age of castles and crowns. Stories and films show shining armor, beautiful gowns, and magnificent halls glowing with candlelight. The hardships, dangers, and uncomfortable realities are often forgotten. The real world of kings and queens was far less glamorous. Castles were colder. Air was heavier, disease was closer. Power existed, but it came with constant pressure and danger. Behind every crown was a person living in a world where luxury and discomfort existed side by side. The age of monarchy was not a fairy tale. It was a world where power ruled everything, where survival was uncertain, and where even those who sat on thrones lived, surrounded by risks that modern audiences rarely imagine today.